Good afternoon. How are you guys today? The sun's shining. Has anybody been outside yet?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I know. It was so nice. Warm weather. The wind's a little high, but hey, nobody's going to complain about that after what we've experienced this winter, right? Well, how's the couple weeks been? Okay. Went by fast. I know. Time flies when you're having fun, right? Mindful practices. Going okay? Been practicing? Getting to your 10 minutes, hopefully, finding those micro moments. I saw you. Your eyes were closed. You're doing a little just this. Awesome. A little micro moment before.
After running to get here and just take it back down.
Yeah, it's getting ready for the moment. I love it. Anybody else find some micro moments that were different than before? That you implemented? Any new ones? No? Okay. Just the same ones that you found before. Good. Everybody talk at once this afternoon. Well, we'll get started because I have a lot to share with you today. Quick review. So mindfulness is, we know this, but this just kind of helps us revisit what it is. It's being aware of the experience unfolding before us without judgment. We know that. It's being in this moment and then allowing this moment to just be what it's going to be. Bless you.
Thank you.
Not what we think it is or expect it to be, or memories of what we think might be happening. It's also about pushing the pause button. Just pausing before we react, before we move forward. It's about discovering how I operate. We've talked a lot about that. It's becoming an expert in yourself. You're the only one that knows the things going on in your head. So it's really about becoming an expert. It's about ending unnecessary suffering. We talked about that as well. But much of what we think, much of what we do to embody things, we just add to our own suffering. So mindfulness can help us navigate that so that we're not adding to our own suffering. It's about learning to be non-judgmental. It's about discovering ourselves, being curious about ourselves and learning. It's about becoming aware of what's going on within me and around me. That's what we've been doing with our attention practice. So tuning in to see what's happening so that we can, make good decisions from there, whether it's our thoughts or our actions. It's about, of course, being in the here and now. It's about being intentional about my choices and my actions. So instead of just allowing things to dictate how I act and react and live, it's really when we can push the pause button, then we can be more intentional about how we are living, which is hopefully going to help us create our best self in the life that we want to live. Mindfulness is not, it's not about becoming Buddhist or becoming someone who meditates for long periods of time. It's not about being isolated. So we've talked a lot about that this is really meant to be embedded in your day. Now certainly it's a little easier in the beginning of meditating to do it when you're kind of alone without a lot of distractions, but the ultimate goal is that this is embedded in your day. Anywhere you are, sitting in here waiting for a meeting, there's all kinds of things going on, but that we can just be still and do a little practice for 30 seconds and reap those benefits. It's not about separating myself from a regular life. Again, embedding it in our day. It's not about operating on autopilot. We know that. Shifting off of that so we can be intentional. It's not about not caring. So I think there's some, sometimes people will oftentimes make a judgment that when we push the pause button, we don't join in with our emotions, that it might appear that we're not caring. But in fact, we're just creating some space to be really be able to be mindful of how we react to people and how we can support them and help them, as opposed to just kind of getting caught up with their trauma and allowing that to take us kind of in a downward spiral. Because I think oftentimes we don't just do that knee-jerk reaction, and sometimes people expect us to do that because maybe we've been doing that for a long, long time. And when we don't, people can take pause with that and make a judgment there on occasion. So then we don't make judgment of their judgment, right? It's a little snowball there. It's not about a specific technique that must be practiced a certain way, right? It's making it your own. It's just starting where what I give you and then really creating it your own. It's not an ability to resist emotion. So we're feeling what we're feeling. We aren't necessarily letting those emotions dictate how we live, but we're certainly feeling. In fact, sometimes I think we might even feel more because we are in this place of being very mindful and noticing those feelings. It's not about relaxation, although that's a nice side effect of being calm and being still. But that's not necessarily our purpose, although it could be if you're trying to relax during sleep. It's not about not being. So again, I think that when we can tune in, we actually feel things that maybe we didn't notice that we were feeling. So it's really about that tuning in. So a few things about what it is and what it isn't. We know that to create change, we need to develop two things. We need to develop that awareness and self-understanding. Did anybody notice an awareness this week that they want to share?
I'm aware the clock is an hour off.
I noticed it when I came in. Yeah. Change it, please. Well, and I would have reached up to change it, except I jacked my back up, which I'll talk about in a second. But
Anyway, go ahead.
yes, I'm glad you were aware of that.
Yes,
Thank you.
quite aware.
Awareness is good for a lot of things, right? So we're always building that awareness about ourselves, about things in our world. So quick review, because as always, we're trying to build that awareness of ourselves, which is why we want to understand how the brain's hardwired, right? Brain fact number one, we know this. We work on autopilot more times than not. When responding to brain impulses, the most traveled pathway usually wins. That is, we are most likely to act the same way in similar situations, right? So we've used that neural pathway so many times. Same situation comes along, we're going to most naturally use that same neural pathway, unless we intervene. Our brain's go-to default is the highly traveled pathway. Like traveling a familiar road home, we frequently progress on autopilot, right? It's kind of like cruise control, right, for our brain. Did anybody notice this week? Being on autopilot? No? Okay, well, I have one to share. I always, because I'm a work in progress, just like you, I always have stories, and I'm like, okay, another good story to share, thank you. Self. So I think I shared this with Alan maybe on Friday. So last Friday morning, so my husband and I started a new workout routine. We joined the rec center that's near our house, and I've been trying to get him to work out for a long time. And you know, we can't force other people to do things, so it's kind of like, what can we do together? And so we joined, and we've been going at 5:30 in the morning, which is extremely hard. But we've been doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday for probably a couple months, right? It's been going good. He goes upstairs and he works out in the equipment, and I do a class. So Friday morning, he said, well, I'm not going to go because he's got some things going on in the day. You don't want to get too sore, whatever. And so I went anyway, and I had my class, and I'm walking out in the lobby where with me, and my daughter was there because she comes to the class too, and we're chatting, and I'm just looking around, thinking, well, where's Rob? And my daughter's like, well, where's Dad? I'm like, I don't know, he must have lost track of time. And we're talking, and I talk to the next person that comes along, and the next person, and next thing I know, I'm like, man, we gotta go, I got things to do, I need to go in the shower, da, da, da. So I'm like, so I walk upstairs to the gym where he normally works out, and I'm looking around. Literally, this is 15 minutes after I'm done with the class, and it hits me. He didn't come, right? I drove myself there, right? Just an hour earlier. And it was not even on my radar. Like I'm going, where is he? Where is he, right? Because I was on autopilot. And how easily we can shift to that, you know? So I laughed all the way home. And I'm like, oh my God, what a great example of being on autopilot. You know, and you know, it is what it is. It's neither here nor there, but it's just a great example of that's what we did. We've been doing the same thing for a couple of months, right? And so it changed up. And it took me a while to figure that out. So anyway, brain fact number 2. We know our brain's an energy guzzler, right? We consume energy when we sense, interpret, deliberate, and use willpower to act or stop ourselves from acting, which is basically what we do every day, all day long, right? So we're using energy all day long. Mental energy as well as physical energy. we need a cache of resources to operate skillfully, and our brain is wired to take the path of least resistance whenever it can. It likes that cruise control. Right? This is why our habits, it likes that thing that we do all the time. It likes autopilot because if there's resistance, then it's going to suck up some mental energy, and it's always trying to conserve that, right? So, anybody tuned into this week? I don't have a story for this one. Not this week anyway, but we want to continue to build this awareness, right? Brain fact number 3. So my brain and I assign an emotional tag to everything I experience, right? These tags have degrees of positivity and negativity attached. Like receiving an unexpected gift might be a +6, right? Working overtime, a -12. Watching a rerun of a television program, a perfect 0. So we have these varying degrees. It's not just always, one or the other. There's variations within that. So tuning into that, maybe even saying to yourself, well, what is this? Just to keep that top of mind. They happen at lightning speed, and they shape our attitude, which is what we're going to start talking about next time. These are a key piece of the attitudes that we embody. I can learn to become gently aware of my emotions and my evaluative judgments and use them as information rather than food for feeding an attitude I may not want. So we want to notice these. It's not to judge them, but just to notice so that we can then decide what we want to do, right, with those emotional tags. Anybody notice any emotional tags? Certainly no one's going to talk about working overtime. Because everybody loves to do that here. Anybody? You guys have a lot to say today. Gosh.
There's this movie I watch whenever it comes on, and I get a 12, +12 out of every time I see that
Do
movie.
you? Isn't that
I
nice?
can't wait for it to come on. I should just buy it.
You should watch it every day. Yes. I love it.
And it's a really violent movie.
Okay, what does that tell us about you? I'm kidding.
I love it.
Okay, well, good. Well, and maybe tuning into other things that are +12. There's some other +12s. I don't know if we want to tune into that. So I've had a couple of these actually in the last couple of days. Well, Saturday, I jacked my back up. I was being wild and crazy. Yeah, I bent over. Literally bent over and went the wrong way, and I was like, and it's been not good, and it has been really hard. I've been noticing this emotional tag, right? And so it's really helped me to identify that, because if I get sucked into that, if I shine my light on the pain and I can't believe this, and this is just, I do da-da-da-da-da, right? You have the little pity party and all that stuff. That's not going to help anything, right? And so by just really noticing that emotional tag that I'm giving it, helps me give myself grace. It helps me realize, actually I was saying earlier, what it does has been really an appreciation for people who experience chronic pain, on a daily basis, or who have, some kind of physical pain that they have to deal with. I mean, literally, I feel like I'm 100 getting in on my car and moving, and I'm thinking, I'm so grateful that I don't deal with this all the time, and I know it's going to pass. And so just being with it, knowing it's going to get better, and I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, the other emotional tag that I recently noticed was last night. I taught a class. There's an organization, Lisa called Lisa Cares. It's a nonprofit. They do education, parent education, and drug abuse programs. And so I do some things with them. And last night I did a class on parenting, mindfulness parenting. And so there were supposed to be 17 people who are coming. And we get there, and the time comes, and it's a little over, and we get 4 people. Yeah. You can imagine my emotional attack. Because I'm volunteering my time, and I'm like, I notice this thing here, and then it's like, okay, let me mindfully create some space. First of all, it is what it is. And then I decided just to say to myself, the people who needed to be here are here. That's all I can do. I can't control that all those other people didn't let us know that they weren't coming, you know, I can't control that. Because if I'm gonna react, not be mindfully, I would probably like, "Grr," right? But I'm hopeful that it was helpful to those 4 people. But I also want to use that as information. So I reached out to the director, like, you know, this is, getting people to come out is hard. So last year I put an online class that they post on their website, and I think that that might be what we go back to. So using that as information to learn from. How can we navigate this in a different way to make it work for everybody? So anyway, those are a few of my own emotions. I'm sure there are more. Okay, attention's been our pillar. This is our last week on attention. As we know, attention's about what is happening, right? What is happening inside of us, what's happening outside of us. We know that attention is selective. We know that what we attend to grows. So we are being selective on what we pay attention to. We don't pay attention to everything, right? We pay attention to certain things. And whatever we're paying attention to grows. I wanted to share, I put this little note to myself, this pain study. I think this is really fascinating. So there was this study that was done, and they had 2 groups of people, all of them experienced chronic pain. And they gave them an outline of a body. And the first group, they had them, and I don't have the details of the study. I don't know if it was multiple times a day or once a day. But they had them color in the body shape where their pain was. So for me, it would be my lower back. I'd be coloring that multiple times a day in my outline of my body. The other group colored in where they didn't have pain. So their attention was where they weren't experiencing pain. Now, they were also monitoring their pain medications without them knowing. And the group, you can imagine, which group do you think lowered their pain medication without them knowing? The ones who were focusing on their pain or focusing where their pain was not? Was not. So because when we're focusing on it, it becomes more intense, right? If we're focusing on that fear, that becomes bigger. If we're focusing on that worry, if we're focusing on where the pain is. So I've been very mindful of that. It's like, okay, where am I feeling good? The last couple of days. But that's fascinating, that so much so that they could change their medication without their knowing. So where we place our attention is extremely important. We want to start recognizing that and being aware of that. So we are wise when we can skillfully direct our attention. So direction is skilled when it is intentional and focused, which is why we practice our stable attention. Right? That was our first practice. It's intentional. It's gently pursued, which was our last practice. Right? Open, mind chatter, just allowing us to rise and float away or go down a stream or whatever we did with them. And today we're going to talk about also compassionately observing them, which is our vivid attention, which is our new practice that I'm going to share with you today. So we want to build all of these because they're all kind of helping us develop a skill that's each a little bit different, that's going to help us navigate our attention. So our stable attention, of course, as you remember, it's important to train our busy brain to develop concentration, sustain focus, so we can be present even while being surrounded by distractions, right? So ultimately, you could be in chaos and cultivate that ability to be present. That's our goal. No matter where we are, what we're doing, we can get into the present moment. Anybody still using this one? Yeah. Okay. Anybody change it up? Try something different this week? Last couple weeks? You're still doing the same thing that you've always been doing? That's okay too. Yeah, whatever works for you. As long as you've landed on something that feels good, then by all means, keep doing that. That's our home base. Anybody have a time when this was helpful? Last couple weeks? Like where you were just like, I really needed it and it was really helpful?
Children, just children.
Say no more.
Yeah, it says enough, right?
Say no more. Sometimes people have told me, like, I went in for like a dental visit or a medical procedure or something like that, and it was like, you know, it was significantly helpful. I think for all of us it's helpful, but I think there are certain times maybe where you're just feeling, you know, and it just brings you back. Okay, nobody wants to share?
I'll share.
Okay.
It's like the kids, when they tell me their problems, they don't want an answer.
No, they don't. They just want, they want to,
That's a struggle for me, because I have all the answers.
of course you do, but only they would listen. You
Right.
could save them from so much trouble.
So it's been very beneficial for me to breathe as they're telling me, and just in and out, and to keep my mouth shut, basically, because
Yeah.
they just want to talk.
Have they noticed?
No.
No.
Unfortunately.
They're too busy talking.
I'm too busy.
Well, sometimes people do start to notice, you know, especially when we start embodying reactions that are a little bit different, you know. So I was wondering if they're like, mom's not, is it mom or grandma or
Both.
both? Yeah.
Yeah, grandkids and
Yeah.
kids. But you know, years ago, I worked at a place where our customer service, or our customer support was in Costa Rica. And I learned then in their culture, they're not like Americans, they don't talk over each other. So every time I would say something, they would stop talking. And so I tried to practice that then because I thought it was so courteous.
Yes.
So my kids are used to me doing
Okay,
that part now, so they.
So maybe it's more your
silence.
own
Yeah.
calm,
Yeah.
so then you can be present.
But it is definitely helping me,
Okay.
because it's all about me right now.
Well, okay, that's good. We have to have our own personal growth.
Yeah,
When we get healthy, then we affect everybody around us. We're gonna learn that as we get on this, so it's good.
because for me, it's like when they tell me, I get all worked up.
Of course, we
intense and
embody it.
wanna do something, and then, but now I'm just able to breathe through it.
It's awesome.
So-
Because you know what I think is interesting too, and as moms and as grandmas, and I can't speak for you men, maybe you're the same way, but sometimes our kids will tell us stuff and we embody it much longer than they do even. Sometimes they move on and we're still working through it and processing it, and that's not, we just like to add to our own suffering, don't we? Well, we want to just get it all, make it all okay. And sometimes they can be on, and sometimes I'll call later and they'll be, oh yeah, got that figured out. I've been stewing on this for 3 days for you, you know? So we don't have to do that. Just breathe through it. I love that. Thank you for sharing. So our second practice, last time we met, was cultivating that open attention. Right? So we know that mental events that linger in the background shape our perception. Those are those things that are spinning in the background that we might not even know are there. And it's important to witness and let go of those thoughts without judgment. So we can create this openness within our mind. Not only just to free our thoughts so that we can just be done with some of those things, but also then we have this space that's just receptive, open for big thinking, creative thinking, decision-making, problem solving, or just peace. Because sometimes all of that stuff spinning takes its toll. It's just kind of exhausting if we're aware of it. If we're not, it's draining us even if we don't know it. So how did this practice go? Good. Anybody change it up from the cloud? Did you do a cloud? Did you do something different? Maybe do a balloon or balloon. Did we talk about the stream last time? Yeah. Anybody put a leaf on a stream or anything? Yes? No? Okay.
Somebody that's not here today, she said she did.
Oh, you'll share her story, but you won't share yours.
She wanted me to.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm
She did say that.
Yeah.
I'm teasing.
But she couldn't do, because I missed the last
Wow.
session.
Oh.
The cloud, so she did an ashword and then blew it all up.
Hey, I love it.
Stephanie.
Did a what?
Stephanie.
Did a, what'd she blow up?
An asteroid.
An
asteroid. An asteroid.
Oh,
She
Reese.
must love astronomy or something. Yeah.
This is your personality. That sounds about right. Good, sir.
That's making it your own. right? Whatever works for all of us. Was anybody surprised by some of the things that popped up, or were they pretty much the things that you knew you were spending on? Yeah,
Random.
random. Isn't it crazy? Sometimes you're like, where did that come from? I don't even know where that thought came from. I haven't thought that thought in 3 years. So
Well,
you're
not, you don't think you have, you probably have.
probably,
Yeah.
probably. Well, it's kind of like that thought I had when I woke up in the middle of the night. It was when I had gotten pulled over. Did I tell you that?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of thing. It's like, where'd that come from? Popped out of nowhere. So some random thoughts. Anybody else?
Mine was I gotta get gas after work. Oh, I'm supposed to let that go.
So your to-do
Okay, let
list.
it go.
Uh-huh.
I said I better not forget that.
Yeah, yeah, and that happens sometimes. So it's like, I'm gonna let it go, but don't go too far. Yes.
I gotta drive for 30 miles. So.
Oh, yeah, you don't wanna forget that. Oftentimes it's our to-do list, you know, or just things that, it's weird sometimes, the things that will bubble up. Anybody else?
I found the same things coming up over and over. Like, I could push them out in my visual, but they were right back the next time I tried it.
And that's common, you know, and so we don't make judgment of that. It's just like, oh, there you are again. Bye-bye, I'm gonna let you go. Well, because our brain's been in charge for a long time, right? We've been, you know, it's been kind of running the show for a while, and we've been thinking that thought maybe for a while. And so it's gonna take time. Eventually, the brain will be like, oh, okay, maybe I am done. Maybe it'll go away for longer. But that's great information for you. Maybe that's, I don't know, you could be curious about it. So next time we meet, we're going to talk about curiosity. You know, it might be something you choose to be curious about, that thought, reoccurring thought. I don't know. If nothing else, you might just be like, oh, hello, friend. I'm going to let you go one more time. So yeah, I think that happens a lot to people. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, oh, no, okay. So really, we're just kind of tuning into that mind chatter, right? It also tells us it's telling us what our brain is paying attention to. And that's valuable information for us as we become experts in ourselves.
So what's just random, completely mundane things like, think about basketball and then a cheeseburger and then driving a car and then it's 1,000 thoughts a second and you cannot control that. And unless you got some kind of white noise or some stimuli going around, all you can do is focus on that. That's a problem for me, especially at night when I'm trying to go to bed, because it's just nonstop.
Yeah. So we're not trying to control anything. I think anytime we have that mindset that we need to control it, then that we're putting it in a box, like, you know what I mean? So just so we can think of it in a different way. Well, certainly you have a lot of thoughts that come to you. Have you done any of this that has anything worked?
It really doesn't.
It
I mean,
doesn't.
as soon as I push one out, 5 more come
And so what do you do with those 5 more?
in. Stay up all night and just keep trying to push them out.
Have you tried moving? Have you tried some different things? So sometimes we have to get creative, right? Because just the standard, you know, thing may not be working for you right now. I want to encourage you might look for an app, and I have, actually somebody in here shared this app. It's called Insight Timer, and it's free, and it's got all kinds. It's got some sleep ones. It's got energy, it's got creativity, it's got mindfulness, it's got all kinds of options, and all different people do them, and they're all different lengths. So you can choose the one that you want. A gentleman that I did some training with a couple years ago, he was the same way at night. So he started doing, and I think it's just this repetition, right? I think it's sticking with it and keep kind of tweaking it a little bit. Experimenting. I think I said for me, I can't do it in bed to get out of bed. Perhaps maybe doing it with music on might create a sense of relaxation that allows your brain to maybe soften a little bit. You know, perhaps visualizing something other than a cloud. I can't tell you because I That's the problem. You know, there's no recipe, so this is just kind of a place to start. So I encourage you to keep with it though, because sometimes for this gentleman that really struggled, he does it every night now and he sleeps like he's never slept before. So I think that if we keep at it, don't give up, and if we can, you know, really get that, our brain to start recognizing that we do want to let go of those. I mean, certainly there's other things too that might be a part of that. Sleep is very complex. So sometimes we have to train the brain to be done for the day, and I'm not an expert in sleep. I know that I had an instructor in graduate school who was, and she talked about how, you know, we want to get out of bed. So we don't want to lay in bed when we can't sleep. Get out of bed, have a dim light behind us, read something mundane for 15 minutes. So it's basically telling the brain that we're gearing down, and then we go back. I can't tell you the whole routine, but you might want to, I don't know what you've investigated in terms of sleep, but we could chat later about it. You know, just kind of see what's maybe worked in the past and what hasn't. It's not going to be a quick fix. Keep at it. And the randomness is crazy, isn't it? It is. Hopefully there's no judgment there. It's just, cheeseburger. Yeah. Am I hungry? Maybe I'm hungry. That's what happens to me. And then I need to get up and eat. You didn't hear that, but when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're up for like 2 hours. It's hard not to eat because you're up. It's been like 10 hours since you ate. Yeah, so it's about making good eating choices, right? Okay, so our practice today is cultivating a vivid attention, okay? And this is exactly what it is. Cultivating a clear focus by noticing details. When you think of vivid, what do you think of? Right.
Clear.
Clear, colorful, crisp, right? It's just, it's vibrant. You can see it really well. And that's exactly what we're going to do with this attention practice, by noticing details. And so this means that we're going to notice, and then we're going to look closer so we can see things for what they really are, not what we assume or think we know. And we're going to, our steps are going to be to pause, suspend judgment, and investigate. Okay? So I want to share with you really quickly this pyramid for mental processing, and I don't want you to think you have to understand all of this, but it's just the concept is really interesting. So at the bottom we have our bare sensations, right? See, smell, taste, hear, touch. As we move up this mental processing, we have our perceptions, which are those early conclusions we make about something. And then we have our interpretations, the meaning that I attach to it. And then we have our belief, connections with memories I already have from the past. And then we have our prediction, which is our action based on what I know for certain. Now, what we want to do is we want to train ourselves to do bottom-up processing. And we want to catch ourselves to do top-down. Now, both are important, but we want to catch ourselves so that we can do appropriately which one in times if we're trying to live intentionally. So let me give you an example. Top-down is what we do when we're on autopilot. We go straight to the top, we know for certain what we're supposed to be doing, and we just do it. There's no thinking, right? We just know, boom, we're done. That's great, right? It's kind of like, let's just say, hello, welcome. It's kind of like riding a bike, right? You get on a bike, even when you learn when you're 5 years old, and you can basically ride, right? You don't have to think through all the steps of riding a bike. It's really helpful. It also conserves energy, right? So top down is good. The problem is that we do top down a lot, and we want to catch ourselves, and they may not serve us well. So we want to catch ourselves when we're doing top down, because we might want to do bottom up in certain situations. So I'll tell you what happened. So bottom up, if we're talking about riding our bike, would be imagine when you first started learning to ride your bike, right? It was like, okay, where are my feet? What am I feeling? Getting my balance. You're stepping through all the little steps, right, to get to the top, which is you actually get to ride your bike. You actually learn how to ride. But you have to kind of gather those steps on the way up. I was thinking that same thing with stick shifts. Anybody drive a stick shift in here? I love that. I haven't driven one in years. You know, it's one of those things you can get in one, you still drive it, right? Like it was yesterday. I know, I love that. So anyway, so I actually had an interesting situation, of course, that I'm not proud of, but I had, about a month ago, I was, this is why we tune in, I was like feeling a lot of stress, I was having a lot of muscle tension in my shoulders, so I scheduled an appointment with my massage therapist, who I go to maybe once a month. And so I had called about 2 weeks earlier and made the appointment, and this Friday, I clearly remember it was a jam-packed Friday, like back to back to back to back. I had so many things to do, but I'm like, okay, self-care is important. I really need to do this. It's before the weekend. I know I'm just going to be a mess if I don't. Carved out my little hour, and I get to the office, and I go in, and I'm standing at the desk, and the gal who checks people in, she's in this in-depth conversation with somebody who's leaning over her back, and they're on the computer, and their faces are showing me that like something's wrong, And so I'm like, okay, but being patient, no big deal. And finally she looks up and she's like, can I help you? And I said, well, I'm here for my massage at 10. And she's this lady looking at me, she looks at me, she's like, you don't have an appointment. And I'm like, oh no, I called 2 weeks ago. I made an appointment. And she looked at each other, nope, no appointment. Sorry. Or no, she didn't even say sorry. She's like, nope, no appointment. So I felt my body like heating up. Like I'm like, right? I just start to feel it. And so then I'm standing there and the lady continues to talk to her about this issue they have on the computer. And I start to walk toward the door and I'm waiting for her to say, I'm so sorry this has happened. Good customer service, right? We'll get this figured out, maybe we can get you in, early next. No. I'm just like, oh, okay. I walk to my car and I'm like on fire. We do this, don't we? And it's like, how dare she? Like, she doesn't understand. This is really important. And I had so many things to do today. And I carved out this hour. And she just didn't, she wasn't even nice. She didn't give me any, blah, 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 right? Top down, just angry at her, right, for treating me that way. Okay, by the time I got to my car, I'm like, all right, Robin, simmer down. Let's just breathe. Let's do some bottom-up processing, right? Because I went straight to the top. I knew, right? Rude, disrespectful, right? So then I'm like, all right, and I can't tell you, it's not like this works perfectly every time, but it's like, okay, I'm feeling a lot of anger. What I saw was she was working on something with somebody. There was an issue. I could see that, right? It wasn't a normal situation. My perception of her was she was being disrespectful to me. But then I started looking at, wait a minute, actually I kind of hopped to beliefs. They've never done that to me before. Like they've always been great customer service, very kind, very caring. And I think, I'm like, I think there may be some more. I kind of think that she didn't even realize how impactful that was for me. I think she was distracted with the issue she was dealing with, right? So she had it wasn't even on her radar that she should be being kind to me, a customer, because I think she had this thing happening. And so by the time I got to the top, I'm like, you know what? First of all, it is what it is. So I can either be angry the rest of the day and be pissed, or I can decide to give her grace, to say, maybe she didn't know. If it happened too often, I'd probably go someplace else, right? Because we do that when it happens time and time again. But every once in a while, people have bad days. I'm sure there are times where I have not done something and maybe disappointed other people or angered other people. So I wanted to offer her grace. And so, but this really just allowed me to let it go. So then I'm like, okay, I have a whole hour. What am I going to do? So then I was like, find the mustard seed, right? Find something good in my hour. So I did something I needed to get done, right? And I salvaged the hour. And mean, I still was like this all weekend. But that, it's just an example. So we want to catch ourselves when we go straight to the top and we think we know, right? And then we want to just catch ourselves and gather some information. We may come to the same, conclusion, but maybe not, right? Maybe not. And it might change. If nothing else, it gives us some time to process a little bit and then to make a decision on what we want to do. So just be thinking about that with things in your life. So our brain responds to 3 types of attentional cues in our life. Okay, first it notices what we need for survival. That makes sense because we're hardwired for survival, right? We know that. We appreciate that. Second, it notices what appeals to our interest or demands our attention, right? These distractions that appeal to us or whatever's right in front of our face. And then number 3 is it notices what we choose to notice. Now, most of the time we function in the second category. We automatically absorb and respond to demands and appeals from our current environment. Because this can weaken our ability to direct our own attention, it helps to practice paying attention on purpose to keep number 3 strong. In number 2, we're letting the world dictate where our attention is. This is appealing, this is appealing. Oh, you need my attention right now, right? We're letting all these things decide where our attention is. We are not really being in control of that always. So if we can build this muscle of number 3, of being able to see something and stick with it without getting kind of sucked into it, we're going to build that muscle so that we can be really intentional and choose, again, what we pay attention to. So, practicing vivid attention provides us with details we hadn't noticed before. This can be about a feeling that's internal or a situation that's external. Now, all of this happens in our head, okay? It's just that whatever's happening in my head is an internal thought or an external situation. But it's all happening in our mind. And this allows us to learn about ourselves, and this helps us grow. So, this is an example. So here's an internal example. Normally, I don't even notice tense muscles, irritation, short temper, right? Practicing vivid, if I'm working on that. First I'm going to pause. I'm going to notice my tension, irritation, temper. Wow, I'm really snapping at people. I'm feeling a little something here, like I feel a little off today. Right? I notice this shortness in me, whatever, right? So first we pause. Second, we suspend judgment. We don't need to beat ourselves up about it. Well, of course I'm angry because I got so much to do and da-da-da-da, right? We just notice it, suspend judgment, and then we investigate. So let me think, when did it start? Was there a trigger? Was it that person that cut me off on the road on the way to work? Who's involved? Is it a certain time of day? What can I learn about myself? This is a great place for you to be thinking about your activity on the sheet that Alan talked about. So what is happening? Am I snacking because I'm hungry or because I'm bored? What can I learn about myself? Is it because who's involved, right? Time of day. So for me, it might be, I don't know, different things. I didn't have breakfast. Gosh, I didn't have breakfast. Maybe that's why I was snapping at my coworker this morning, right? Or I had a different breakfast and maybe it didn't sustain me an hour. I don't know. But all of this gives us information about ourselves. External example that's still inside our head might be, normally, I can't believe I said that. Why do I do that? I'm just like my mom. What was she thinking of me now? So I think I'd stuck my foot in my mouth and was spinning on it. I was at my book club, said something, and then all the way home, and ladies, am I right? We can spin on that for hours and hours. So if I was practicing my vivid attention, which I do now on a regular basis, first I pause, first I notice that I'm thinking of all these things, right? And then I suspend judgment, right? They're just the thoughts. And then I investigate. So let me think. That comment was one in the midst of hundreds. It wasn't hurtful. I have a good relationship with the person I said it to. I don't think they took it the wrong way. I think maybe my perception was that it was. And it allows me to re-perceive it. Because when I'm just here, oh, we take this little thing and it just gets blown up, right? So if we can create some space, we can investigate it without judgment. It's this, and this. Okay, not that big a deal. Sometimes when I do this, occasionally I'll circle back around to that person and be like, hey, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean that. And oftentimes they're like, I didn't even notice. Like, because we make things much bigger, right? It's oftentimes. And then sometimes it might be, like, hey, I appreciate that. But sometimes that just makes me feel better to do that. And then other times I just let things go because I kind of figured out that it really wasn't a big deal. So that's kind of two examples. We're going to begin the same as we do with mind chatter, okay? But we're going to look to see what our brain is paying attention to, which is why we're going to allow those thoughts to kind of arise. But this time we're going to pick a thought or a cloud and investigate closer to look at, sorry, that's a typo here, for what it really is in simplest terms, which provides us the opportunity to re-perceive. So we're going to stick with that thought instead of just noticing and letting it go like we did before. We're going to allow it to be there, and we're just going to stay with it. We're going to just, as if we're like, CSI, we're just gathering the facts about it, not what we think about it, or assume it to be, or wish it were, or hope it were, or what we're feeling about it, just the facts, okay? 3 steps: pause, suspend judgment, and investigate. So, this is our closer look practice. So I'm going to lead you through. Oh, I was going to say, I don't think I might not get back up. It's kind of tricky getting up and down, so I'll just pretend I'm sitting. But if you want to put both feet on the floor, hand in your lap, just in a comfortable position. And again, if you feel comfortable closing your eyes or lowering your gaze, whichever feels most comfortable to you. And we're going to begin by just noticing our breath. Noticing that life-giving air as we breathe in and breathe out. Allowing our breaths to get a little deeper and a little slower with each breath cycle. Helping our brain to get into the present moment. Does your brain notice the ticking of the clock? Or a thought may pop into your head. Just notice. And gently bring your attention back to your breath. To allow a thought, all is welcome without preference, so whatever thought comes to you, allow a thought to arise. Imagine it above you in a cloud, and before we let it go, we're going to pause, we're going to suspend judgment, we're going to investigate it, as if we were an outside observer looking in. What it is. See if we can notice something we hadn't noticed before. And when that thought is no longer interesting, go ahead and let it flow off. Watching it as it gets smaller and smaller. Bring our attention back to the next thought that comes to us. All is welcome. Allow that thought to rise. Imagine it in a cloud. We're going to pause. Suspend judgment. And investigate. I'm just going to gather some facts so we can see it clearly. Feel yourself being drawn judgment. And investigate. We've gathered all the information we can, and go ahead and let that cloud float off. Watching as it gets smaller and smaller. And bringing our attention back to our breath. To that life-giving air. You breathe in, breathe out. And grateful for this moment. And we slowly open your eyes when you feel comfortable. Okay, so how was that? Relaxing. Good. Did anybody notice themselves wanting to kind of get drawn into their thought? That can happen really easily because we do. It's kind of like the thought's there and then we start naturally getting sucked in. So this is where we're really trying to be building that muscle of choice. Like, no, I'm going to stay separate. I'm just going to look at it, right? I'm not going to get drawn into it. I'm just going to gather the facts so that we can re-perceive. Sometimes we can re-perceive things and sometimes we can't. Sometimes it doesn't need that. But this is really where we start. I will tell you, this practice, for me, we start this in a meditation because sometimes we just don't know what might be on our mind. But this meditation for me personally, I don't do in a meditation now. I will notice that I've got something on my mind that's kind of weighing me down, and then I will do this. So for instance, when I was in graduate school and I had just learned this, what popped up was this paper. And in graduate school, all you do is write papers. And I'm not a writer. Like, writing is not something I enjoy doing, and there's so many papers. So I remember I had just gotten another assignment for a paper, and I'm like, I wanted to get sucked in, like, rah, right? And it was like, okay, wait a minute. Because we spin on that stuff, right? And build it into this big old thing. And when I did my vivid attention practice, it was like, okay, let me gather the facts. It's 3 pages, double spaced. I get to pick my topic. I have 3 weeks to do it. I have to write it tutor on Canvas, right? And it's like, okay, that's not that big of a deal. But we make things into a really big deal without knowing. And so if we can, again, notice and create that space and just gather the facts about it, we can re-perceive to impact our life, right? That's really what it's all about. But we do that in meditation sometimes because sometimes we just don't know, and we're practicing this. So even if it's nothing, like, hamburger, dinner, oh, let's see. Instead of getting sucked into, oh, I don't know when I'm going to do dinner, I don't have all the ingredients in it, it's just, there's dinner. Fix it when I get home, whatever, all the facts about it. So we're just really paying attention on purpose. This is our practice this week. So, wrap things up this week. Continue to think about how your brain works. See if you can notice something that you hadn't noticed before. Stretch yourself a little bit. Place your closer look reminder card someplace handy to remind you to practice. See if you can get to that 10 minutes a day. Even if it's not even significant stuff that you're just practicing gathering facts on. Okay, it's gonna start becoming much easier to do when there are bigger things that we need to gather facts on. Start slow, give yourself grace, make it your own. Okay, and our quote to end with: the most precious gift we can offer another is our presence. So true. Any thoughts, questions, comments?